know that I am a failed stand-up comedian. And what that means is that I've stood up on a stage, told a joke, and heard crickets. Like right now. Some people, like me, want to make others laugh because it brings them joy. And then there are people who tell jokes because they're uncomfortable. The biggest conversation stopper at a get-together is the D word, capital D, the word for transition known as death. So today, I want to talk about that stigma that's around the word known as death. Because if we can wrap our mind around how it should be a small cap, not a big cap for D in death, then I think each of us might have something constructive to say if the topic comes up in general. And then everyone can just get on living. Get on with living. Let's first define what is a stigma. So a stigma is a false belief, kind of a reflexive negative attitude that's commonly held, sort of marking something as a failure. I was talking to my daughter about this, and her first job out of college was answering the 988 crisis line for about a year and counseling people. And she was talking about how mental health and the concept of death is just, people are so uncomfortable because she said this was her analogy, it's like an echo chamber. People repeat what they've heard, even though they had no experience with the topic. And then those people repeat what they heard, even though they had no experience either. So I think there's value in talking about destigmatizing death with simple thoughts that even a child could understand. So let's talk about five thoughts. The first one is, look at us. Here we are. We're talking about it. And that's the biggest deal of all, to discuss it. And whether you call it the transition, whether you call it death, or what's next, for real, it needs to be discussed and talked about. So everyone listening and everyone showing up and bringing it up, pat yourselves on the back. You know, there's a saying, not everyone lives, but everyone will die. So I just don't understand why we don't want to talk about it. One theory is, however, a lot of mainstream religions, not exclusive to mainstream religions, but many have used it to control. So if someone can tap into the fear around something, then folks no longer ask questions, they just trust the people talking, and then they wouldn't talk about death anymore, or be curious or scared or even relieved. But we should talk about it. The second thought that will destigmatize the idea of death is that analogy that our body is a vessel. So I like metaphors and analogies. Which one would you use? I like the one that our body is like a shell. So maybe that would make me a snail. Or I like to think of myself as a hermit crab, you know, outgrowing and having to buy larger shells or clothes. One of my friends says the metaphor she likes for the body is that it's her spirit driving around this vehicle. She says her vehicle is a Subaru. So what's your body vehicle? What would you picture for your vehicle? I think of mine as a sporty convertible. I should just go out and buy one since I've been driving hatchbacks forever. But we do need to care for this vehicle. So do get your metaphorical oil changes, those occasional new tires. Keep it fueled, don't go too fast. Number 3, thought for destigmatizing the transition known as death. So this journey that we're on here in the body, it's almost like we're traveling, we're on a trip. It's temporary, so pack and prioritize accordingly. If you think about that, it can enhance your time here the rest of your days on earth, because while we have acknowledged that we don't live in this body forever, if we think about packing and prioritizing as if we're on a trip, you might refocus and reprioritize the things that really do matter to you, so that when you're here on this third rock from the sun, earth, you do the things that you really like to do. Thought number 4 as to something that will destigmatize death. Loss is loss, so feel what you feel. Like a kid losing their favorite blanket or their favorite toy, when you lose a person dear to you, it's okay to mourn that loss. A friend of mine, quick story, Wendy, had a Yorkie named Copper for 20 years. And one day was that day. So, Wendy had the vet come to her home in Maryland, and they sat on the floor. This vet was wearing tie-dye. She said he was a great person, and Wendy had bought the vet flowers because she said, although it's her job, it can't be easy, and she's still a person with a heart. But that's Wendy. So she said she thought it was her job to see her dog all the way through to the end and beyond, so that she could honor him, because he had been there for 20 years with her through relationship breakups. They lived in Paris for a year. They moved, bought a house. So this was an important part of her family. But she did say that when he did make that transition out of his body, that she let out this primal wail, and she said it just came from nowhere, but I 100% needed to just scream. And she said, looking back, it was probably less than a minute long. And she said, then after that, I did the usual crying and that kind of thing. But she said, the reason why I think it was important to tell you is because I'm now fine. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, I think I wouldn't be fine today if I didn't feel those feelings fully. So, really express what you're feeling, whatever it is. And it's okay to not be okay. Number 5, to destigmatize what we call death. So we know that those who have had a near-death experience share their experiences with us of what it was like to begin their transition, which are wonderful to hear. But those who have transitioned also share the experience. They tell us through mediums what their experience was like. I can tell you that each one is different. I can tell you that there's not necessarily pearly gates or always a white tunnel or someone with a beard. And I can tell you that I just finished a book by a medium known as April Crawford, and this book is titled, We Tell You Our Stories from the Other Side. And the chapter that I am quoting is called I Am Still Here, and it's from a spirit that the author transcribed, telling her of them talking to their loved one. And they said this: open your mind if you can to the possibility of a connection. I know you believe you have, but the focus of your energy needs to be more accessible on many levels. Your sadness gets in the way as it closes around you like a cloak. My attempts are thwarted to reach you by the wall that the cloak of sadness creates. But don't worry, I won't give up. So for this transition that we have called dying, to reach a state that we have also called death by the so-called dead, the old school traditional teachings, we take those thoughts that were formed since the beginning of time, those thoughts that are stuck in an echo chamber of stigmas, and we release them. Spiritualism declares that that transition is not the end of the story. As we slide out of this body, our focus shifts from the physical discomfort that we had just moments ago and back into what is a cool situation that's underway and unfolding. The last metaphor to that is, do you remember being a child and there'd be a formal dinner, perhaps it was your Sunday dinner in your house, and you would be seated at the table, and the adults would be taking their time, dishing out everything that took so long to prepare, and talking, and trying to get you to talk, and you would eat your food and be done. You ate your food at the normal pace, but they would still be talking and wanting you to stay at the table. Mm-hmm. And it just seemed like an eternity. Finally, someone would say, you're dismissed, or you're free to go. And as a child, you almost leapt out of your chair. You ran to go play because it was so torturous to sit for perhaps what was only 45 minutes or so. But that's an analogy, a metaphor that is kind of like when you're making that transition, the thing that you had been wondering about and the pains that you had been having, if you have an illness, they sort of fade and melt away, and your focus turns toward what's actually happening, and you're excited. Birth, coming of age, and going with age are just like notches on a yardstick, not one more important than the other. So in the end, there's so many more possibilities that are built into what we are understanding to be cooler than we thought, and not nearly as mysterious as we are taught. Thank you.